What's up guys, welcome to Poor Man Mods. Today we're going to be upgrading the clutch master cylinder on my 1JZ Mark III Supra with this very nice Wilwood master cylinder. Alright guys, so here's what's going on with my Supra. I have a spec stage 4 6-puck unsprung clutch in my Supra, and I actually really like it. It's not that bad. I could totally daily drive this car if it was reliable enough. But because I have a stage 4 clutch, when I first put it in, I installed it with a new slave cylinder on the transmission. And that blew the factory clutch master cylinder. No big deal. I figured, it was like 30 years old. I'll put a new one in. I got a OEM one, an ASIN clutch master cylinder, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't know. A couple years ago, I installed it, and this one is now leaking because recently I installed a stainless steel braided clutch line, and I guess the added pressure from that made the seals blow in the clutch master cylinder. And so I'm pretty tired of blowing these OEM clutch master cylinders, so I decided to see if I could upgrade it to a Wilwood clutch master cylinder. So I don't think it's going to be that fun or easy to do this upgrade. I want to do it because I want to stop blowing these, and these are supposed to be super heavy duty and reliable. So in this video, hopefully I'm going to show you step by step on everything that you need to do and get to adapt a Wilwood master cylinder to your Mark III Supra. Let's go. Okay, so there's 3 major components that you're going to need in order to do this swap. Obviously, a master cylinder. This is a Wilwood master cylinder. I believe it's their 5/8 bore. I will have a link to this one in the description down below if you want to get this one, and I got it in their black finish. Yeah, pretty standard Wilwood master cylinder. The next thing you're going to need is an adapter plate to adapt the Wilwood master cylinder to your firewall. Unfortunately, I really wish there was more than one manufacturer of this adapter plate because I'm not too happy with them at the moment. I may or may not have a link to this in the description down below, but this, as far as I can tell, is the only adapter plate to adapt the Wilwood master cylinder to the Mark III Supra's firewall. Yeah, there you go. And thirdly, you will need a brake line solution to make this work. I'm going about it probably the easiest and cheapest way that you could do. You could get a fancy, braided stainless steel line made up for you. You could have something custom made, whatever. But what I did, what I'm thinking about doing, is I got a 3/16 bubble flare brake line from my local auto parts store. You need the bubble flare with this exact fitting because this is the one that goes into the Wilwood master cylinder. Nothing else will work. So there is the part number. I got this one from Advance Auto. Hopefully this helps you out. Now the other end is going to go directly into the Toyota slave cylinder. So obviously this has bubble ends, bubble flares on both sides. We're only going to be using one end for the Wilwood, so my plan is to cut the other end off and flare this and use a metric 10mm flare, whatever the factory one is, and thread it on that way. So those are the 3 major components that you'll need. Really not looking forward to doing this, mainly because, messing under the dash with the clutch fork and all that, or whatever, it's not fun. So first thing we're gonna do, go over to the car and rip out the old slave cylinder. All right, to minimize the mess that we're about to make, I'm going to use a turkey baster and try to get as much brake fluid out as I can, just to reduce the amount of mess. And if you do get brake fluid on your paint and don't wipe it off, it will eat it. So be careful. Does anyone know what this black floaty thing is in these master cylinders? I've never understood what it is. Alright, next I'm going to put a bunch of Taco Bell napkins down in here to catch the rest of the brake fluid that is going to come out when I take off this line. Now I'm using a 10mm flare wrench. I highly recommend using flare wrenches on flare fittings, otherwise you may strip it, which will really ruin your day. So use the right tool for this. Don't use a standard 10mm wrench. I'm not liking this job already. There's hardly room to use a wrench on this thing. All right, 8 days later, I finally got this loose enough to where I can loosen it by hand. You can only get about 1/8 of a turn at a time with the wrench. It's already turning out to be a miserable job. I can finally turn it by hand sometimes. And finally, it's disconnected, and of course there's hardly any room to do anything here. So this is going to drip a little bit. We'll let the napkin soak it up, and now we can go inside the car and undo the 2 bolts that secure it to the firewall and also the pin that connects it to the clutch pedal. Alright, so this part of the video is going to be pretty much impossible. What you want to do is remove all of your plastic paneling right here to give you more room to work with. Here is the clutch pedal. Right here is the pin that connects the clutch pedal to the fork on the master cylinder. First, you need to pull that clip out of the pin, slide the pin out, and that disconnects the fork from the pedal. And then there's 2 bolts securing the master cylinder. Very hard to see. Right there is one of them. The other one is even harder to see on the other side. I literally, ooh, something's at my butt. There's very little room, it's hard to see, so you need to get both of those bolts off, and then pull the master cylinder out. This part is not going to be fun. I'm not looking forward to this at all, especially with adjusting the new master cylinder. It's going to be pretty miserable down here, so good luck to me, and good luck to you guys when you go to do this. So, I'm not going to be able to show you anything that I do here. The next thing you'll see is me pulling out the master cylinder. Alright, so the top left bolt of the master cylinder is a pain to get to. I can't even see it. Literally can hardly even tell you where it is. But you can see where my extensions are. It is a pain. I have 2 wobbles. 2 wobble extensions on there and a 12mm socket. Even if you look straight at it, you can't really see it. But it's over there. It's possible to get on it. It's just really difficult. So, good luck. It is possible to get this thing out. It's not fun. But there it is. So, I know I said earlier I'm not happy with the company that sent me this adapter, and they just gave me another reason. All the bolts that they gave you are too long. You will need to get your own hardware for this. Don't rely on that incompetent fuck to give you the right hardware, because the bolts will bottom out and they won't secure the master cylinder to the plate, and they're also going to be too long going through the firewall. So yeah, you're on your own to get your own hardware when you buy this kit from this guy. And you're also going to have to wait an extremely long time to get your piece. And you're also not going to get everything with it that is listed on the website. So yeah, good luck if you order through this company. Beware. But apparently he doesn't think that's a problem. And the holes do not go all the way through. Only about halfway.
Like that goes all the way through.
Yeah, there's no problem there. No problem at all. Alright, so I have the Wilwood master cylinder bolted to the adapter plate right next to the OEM master cylinder, and I wasn't happy with the travel of the pedal of this. Maybe this is why it blew, who knows. But I'm thinking I want to move this nut out just a little bit. So right now, from the back of the flange to the nut, it's about 1 7/8 inches. So I have this roughly about 1 7/8 inches, and I'm going to move it back a little bit. We're going to try to adjust the pedal before it's even in the car. I'm sure I'm going to have to adjust this multiple times, but we're just going to try to eyeball it a little bit to get us in the ballpark. So now that this is kind of where I think I might want it, we're going to see if we can modify this or somehow make it work on here. Now this is a different thread pitch, so we're going to see what happens here. I might have to make my own fork, but yeah, we're about to cross this road and see what the hell happens. Alright, here is the deal. I've decided not to modify this to make it work with the Wilwood master cylinder. However, you might be able to retap this and make it work. This is actually a dampener. I didn't know this, I'm not sure if many people know this, but this is a clutch pedal dampener, which is going to numb the pedal feel, which I don't want. It actually has about 1/8 inch of play. Check this out. See that? So this is spring loaded to make the pedal feel softer and more friendly and happy, I guess. So I am not going to reuse this. I'm going to make my own clevis. Now Wilwood does sell clevises that will work, but I'm just the kind of guy I'd rather make my own. So let's see if we can make our own. Alright, so here's what I have made up so far. I didn't film this, but basically just took a piece of steel, bent it in a U shape, and made it roughly the same inside width as the factory clevis. And since it's a 5/16 thread on the rod for the Wilwood, I have a 5/16 bolt here holding a 5/16 nut, which I will weld on, and then I will trim this to the appropriate length and drill a hole for the pin. And if I need a longer pin, I did go out and buy a longer pin because this is thicker. So let's go over to the welding table, weld this nut on, and make this thing. Alright, got our nut welded on, and it does thread onto the Wilwood master cylinder. And looking at the factory pin that connects the fork to the pedal, it's definitely not going to work. And there's hardly anything sticking out on here, so the thicker metal on this one is just too much, so we will need a longer pin. And I don't like this one. This is the closest one I could find in my hardware store to this diameter, and it's a little too small. But this seems pretty perfect, this 8 by 1 1/4 bolt. So I'm going to cut this down, drill a hole in it, and make this the pin, and then I will drill holes right about here so we can put the pin through it. Change of plans. Couldn't drill through that bolt. Don't know why. I guess because it's a bolt. And so I bought this big ass nail, and I'm going to try to make this into a pin. Alright, so now we're going to try this little tool that I got off Amazon. See if it's worth a damn. It's a chamfering tool. It's going to put a conical shape on here. Make it a little bit easier to shove through the holes and line everything up. So this should make it a little bit nicer than a jagged edge right there. Okay. The bolt is a little bit small to get the most out of this, but did put a slight chamfer on there. Guess that's a little better. And now we have a completed pin. Now we just have to drill a hole in the clevis for this. Okay, so I measured from the back of the nut to the center of the hole on the factory clevis, and it's 2 1/4 inches. So that's what I'm doing right here. Beautiful. Okay, since the hardware that was provided with the kit was too long in general, I think it's going to be pretty hard to hold this in place on the engine side of the firewall and then get the bolts on. So I'm going to install studs. I made my own studs out of 8 by 1 1/4 bolts. So I think this is going to be easier. I'm improving the stupid design of this thing. So we're going to install these studs with some red Loctite, so they don't come out when you go to loosen the nuts if you go to remove this for whatever reason. That was probably too much Loctite, but I think we'll live. Get them nice and tight, but you don't need to over tighten them. This is aluminum that they're going into. I also finished my clevis, got it drilled out and painted. It's looking really good. So we can now thread this onto the rod. And I have this marked with an approximate location of where the factory one was, so this might be in the ballpark. So that is where we are going to put it. To make this easier to adjust when it's in the car, I'm going to use the provided lock nut here, and I'm going to use some Loctite and tighten it right here at the very end of the shaft. And this will give us a location to where we can put a wrench on here, and we should be able to rotate the shaft with this. So once I get the lock nut and clevis on here, I can tighten these together and then tighten that further onto the shaft and pretty much lock it in place. Alright, so this is what it's going to look like completely assembled. The next step now is to bench bleed this before you put it in the car. I have a little trick for this. We're going to put it in a plastic bag and bench bleed it in the bag to keep the mess contained. I'm going to take this off so the paint doesn't get messed up by the brake fluid. And yeah, it's not going to be fun. So we have the master cylinder in the bag. I don't have any lines to recirculate it back in for a clean bench bleed. So we're just going to have it in the bag, and I'm going to pump the shaft, and it's going to squirt out here, but the bag will contain the mess. Now we'll throw the bag away and clean up the master cylinder. Since it can no longer be used, I'll get the factory line out of the way before we install the master cylinder. And you can see that it was leaking because the paint is all kind of shitted up right here from all the brake fluid. And now we'll put our new master cylinder in. And hopefully things work out. Alright, so I pulled out the old clutch line, and it's a little bit longer than my shorter new clutch line, so I'm not going to use that. I guess I'll use my longer one, and if there's too much down there at the sleeve, then I'll do a coil or just a big bend or something, but I'm going to cut one end off and flare on a metric flare, just like the OEM one, so it'll go into the slave cylinder, and the other end will go into the Wilwood master. We have the M10 flare on the brake line with a new flare, and that was the first flare I did. Didn't forget to put the flare nut on, so now we will just try to feed this down to the slave cylinder. We're not going to attach it to the master yet, we'll just try to get it down and see how we're looking. Hopefully we just need to make a little bend to make this fit. Okay, so I did finish the install. There are a couple things I didn't film. I didn't film at all the installation of the line, the brake line, but I will show you where we routed it and how well it turned out. So the master cylinder is installed with that gold aluminum adapter piece, and we installed the longer brake line, as you can see, with the bubble flare end into the master cylinder. And we bent it to go behind the brake booster, and then just straight down. And I'll show you what it looks like underneath the car. So it just comes straight down from the brake master down the firewall. And there was a little bit of extra with this line, so we just made like a little U-bend to take up the slack. And it goes right into the slave cylinder. So the length of this was pretty much perfect. Didn't have to make a coil or anything, just a little bend right there. And it went in without a single problem. And it's working pretty good now. And we did get both nuts installed onto the studs. Pretty much impossible to see. But now we have it connected to the fork on the master cylinder. And we actually redid the pin. I used a larger like cotter pin and just re-drilled it. Same process as using the nail. I just made it larger to take up a little bit more slop in the pedal. There's still a little bit of slop there, but I think there was some slop from the factory. It's not a perfect fit, but it's really not that big of a deal. And this is pretty easy to adjust. When you undo this pin, if you need to adjust it, there is enough articulation with that rod to where it can fall down and you can thread in or thread out the fork and adjust it as needed. I have it adjusted pretty good, and it's actually easier to adjust than I thought. So yeah, now this is finished and it's all buttoned up. Sorry I didn't show you every single little step, but I think you should get the idea. Alright guys, there you go. So that's how you swap in a Wilwood clutch master cylinder into your Mark III Supra. You'll need that billet aluminum adapter piece, which unfortunately I think you can only get from one dude, and I don't have many good things to say about the purchasing process with this, so I'm not even going to link to him. You can search for it yourself and see what you find, but I don't want to give that guy any publicity at all. And you'll also need that brake line, bubble flare on one end, and then you'll need to do the M10 flare on the other end. So that's really all you need. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I thought the hardest part was going to be adjusting the pedal under the dash, but it really wasn't that hard. So once you get all the components, this really isn't a difficult swap, and hopefully it stands up to the abuse better than the ASIN one that I had, because I blew like 2 or 3 of them. Pretty annoying. So I'm pretty excited about this. The car is now drivable. I did finish the exhaust on this also. It took me like a year to redo it. It's not good. It's just finished. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something, and I will see you next time. Thanks.